Hello, everyone, and welcome to day two of the Neota Network user conference. Welcome to our keynote for the day. And I'm really excited about this one because it really meshes a lot of the interests of Neota with the industry and thought leadership in legal technology. I'd like to introduce to you Richard Tromans, who is the founder of Artificial Lawyer, which is the global legal tech news site. And Richard's also the founder of the Changing Legal think tank. Richard has over 20 years experience in the legal market. And today, Richard's going to be unpacking the liberating effects of no code. So this will touch on a little bit about how no code has created new and more liberating era of legal tech, where lawyers can actually get their hands dirty building without having to accept large, heavy pieces of software and take customization in their own hands. So without further ado, I'll pass it over. So take it away, Richard.
Thanks, Max. Thank you very much for having me on the show. So, what I wanted to talk about really is the liberating effects of no code, and it's not so much a technical talk as almost a sort of cultural one. For me, no code is part of a long and continuous history of what you might call liberation technology, or technology that helps to democratize the work and activities and capabilities of people. So if you go back sort of to even something like 1981 with Steve Jobs and the birth of personal computing and Apple, there was a huge amount of energy and excitement around the potential for personal computing to liberate people, to give them what Steve Jobs famously called the bicycle of the mind, i.e. that a PC or a Mac or other type of personal computer would liberate you. You were no longer having to depend on huge companies like IBM that produce these gigantic and incredibly expensive mainframe computers that nobody could afford, nobody knew how to program, but were just in the hands of large corporations, the military, and so forth. Basically, everybody who had a relatively moderate amount of money could buy a PC, and off they went. Even in 1981, they were seen as quite liberating things. And this whole ethos of computing being a liberating force, a democratic force, a force that gave people some kind of empowerment that enabled them to do more, was very, very much central. And you can see this in that phrase, the bicycle of the mind. The bicycle is an incredible invention, which is with gears and wheels and the frame, you can massively increase a human's ability to travel. The amount of physical effort you put into riding a bicycle can be translated into a huge journey. It's an extraordinary technological achievement. Obviously, we don't think much of it now because we take it for granted. But if you look at a computer, it's doing the same thing. Now, let's just scroll forward a little bit into a bit further along. Now, have a look at Excel. Now, Excel is really interesting, not just because it really expanded what Microsoft could do, but it can do some really fascinating things. Like, for example, you can do functions. Now, this isn't technically a no-code application or platform. We'll come to that very shortly, but it's in the same spirit. You didn't necessarily have to have an accountant to do quite complex calculations. If you were the bookkeeper for a company, you could put all your information in there and not just list that information, but you could create formulas, and you could do an incredibly efficient labor using this system. Now, there was no computer programming, there was no computer language, but you did have to create sort of little formulas and so forth. But it wasn't that difficult. Anybody who was familiar with mathematics could have a go at it, and that was in 1987. Then we scroll forward a bit to the sort of the 90s and early 2000s, and this idea of citizen developers, and sort of the idea that everybody can get involved with producing content, ideas, applications, and so forth. And we saw this very, very, very much with the expansion of the internet through the 90s and into the early 2000s with things like WordPress. Now, again, WordPress is not what I would call a no-code system, but it is a liberating system. It enables you to avoid all of that code. Now, at the back of WordPress, which of course is what Artificial Lawyer is based on. Now, I can't code at all. I can't code for toffee. I tried to teach myself Python, and I got to about page 3 and then gave up. It was way too complicated for my little brain. And I'm sure a lot of people are not naturally suited to, computer coding. Something like WordPress, again, we take it for granted, but the power that gives an individual. I mean, for basically £50, I started Artificial Lawyer and was able to create over a couple of years a globally read website with no production team, no editing team, no tech team. All I had to do was buy a license to download this piece of software, and off I went. Again, more liberating technology. And another example, of course, is something like Squarespace, where companies, even large corporates, can build very, very, very complicated and sophisticated, user-friendly websites with great UI and UX. Again, absolutely no coding in place, no technical knowledge necessary. And again, it's very much in the style of no code, although these are not no code applications. So what actually is a no code application? Because there is some debate about what they really are. And here is one definition that I found on the internet. And it goes like this. So no code development platforms allow you to create apps or applications without writing a single line of code. This implies that anyone with no coding skills can build applications without any hassle. Or at least that's the idea. A no-code platform uses graphical interfaces, so images, you might say like logic diagrams, flows, and connectors, but no actual coding, in addition to configurations rather than traditional programming languages, i.e. you can make something that does something. And I think this is really this is the key point, is that you're not really actually just playing around with, say, text or images. You're actually building something that works. You're building a little digital machine, or to put it more prosaically, you're creating an app. And this is a tremendously powerful thing when you think about it. So we've looked at some other examples just now. So building a little formula in an Excel table, or using WordPress to effectively become your own little newspaper without having any skills around publishing or creating your own website and so forth. This is taking it to a whole other level. It's really much more advanced, because you're skipping the entire programming stage. You're going right to the production of the end tool, and it's running inside your own digital environment. So what do we mean by this? So to Logic, obviously, is an example of that now. Started in 2010. Probably wasn't marketing itself as a no-code company at the beginning, but certainly is now. But let's look at a real sort of concrete example. So if you'll forgive me for using an example that I wrote about, but I thought this was actually a good example. It really shows what you can do. So this is a story I wrote a few weeks ago about a partner, so a lawyer, someone with no technological expertise or coding knowledge whatsoever, was actually on Artificial Lawyer. He was looking at the Artificial Lawyer TV product walkthroughs, and he was actually looking at a walkthrough of Neo2Logic. And as he explained, he was watching it, and suddenly he had like sort of eureka moment, and he thought to himself, "Hey, I can build something." Now that may not sound too amazing to some people, but the idea that a lawyer watches a video about a tech tool and just simply says, "Yes, I can do it," is really a big leap, because until fairly recently that would not have been the case. What they probably would have had to have done would be to pick up the phone, call the head of IT or head of innovation or whoever, and say, "Look, I've got this thing that I want to do. I'm not quite sure how even to describe it to you or how it would work, but I wondered if you could help me with it." And the IT guy would probably scratch their head and think, "Oh no, I really don't want to do this." And who knows, maybe it would not even come to fruition. Now they can take an idea, they can actually pick it up and run with it. And I think this is, it really is a tremendous change. And what they did is they decided to build a application that would enable a lawyer, or the client's legal team, to decide if a document was privileged. There was a bunch of questions. So it was a workflow. Now, as the partner explained, they already had this workflow, you might say on a piece of paper in a desk drawer. They knew the process for deciding whether a document was privileged or not. They just hadn't ever automated it. They hadn't digitized it. They hadn't made it into a workflow in the same way that Nocode can with its no-code technology. So they did that. They did it quickly because they had the process, they had the workflow, the logic diagram already in place. And it took them about 3 weeks to make it. Now, of course, there had to be some product testing. There were probably some UI, UX aspects. And in fact, if you go to the Herbert Smith Three Hills website and have a look at the application, you'll see they've added some very fancy, sort of UI onto it. And, that's fair enough. But the core part of it, the working system that leads you through a bunch of questions and enables you to come to an answer, to decide if that document is privileged or not, has been pretty much done in a no-code way. And it was done because they took the legal knowledge of that lawyer and their team, they crystallized it, they digitized it, they put it into a workflow, and they produced an application that they can use internally. So the junior lawyers can use it, and it actually sort of helps in some ways as an educational tool. And it can also be used by the clients. And it was very, very fast. Now, let's think about what would have been the alternatives. So let's say they decide that they can't build themselves because they don't know what no code is. No code doesn't exist. They ring up a bunch of tech developers and says, "What can you build this from scratch?" It's going to be slow. It's going to be expensive. You're asking lawyers to engage with coders with no kind of interface really between the two. I mean, as many of us know, when lawyers and coders get together, sometimes it can work very nicely. Often it doesn't work so well. Another opportunity, I suppose, would have been to buy a ready-made application. Is there a ready-made system in the market that can very quickly sort out whether a document is privileged or not? Well, perhaps there is one, but certainly it's going to have a cost. There's going to be all kinds of things you're going to have to deal with, like security protocols and so forth. It's going to have to be tested. And also the question is, would the lawyers even engage with this product? Because it wasn't their idea, because it wasn't something that they're helping to build, it's not going to be bespoke to them. And I think that's the other aspect of no code, particularly in this case. This application was built by those lawyers for those lawyers and their clients. It's a reflection of how they saw things. They weren't buying a third-party product that they look at and go, actually, I like half of this product, the other half I don't like. And it's actually very difficult to customize. So from day one, they could build what they wanted. I think that's tremendously powerful. So just kind of summing it up, really, for me, going back to the beginning with Steve Jobs and the liberating effects of personal computing, for me, no code is part of a long continuum of providing the capability to individuals to do more, to use the digital environment to empower themselves, and being able to create applications, I think, is tremendously important in the legal world, which is a very, very data heavy, process and workflow heavy environment. And if you can automate yourself some of these workflows, then you're doing a lot of good for yourself, for your firm, and also for your clients. And I think also probably the final point is that, and this was something the partner Alexander said, Herbert Smith, was that he felt that it had been such a success that it was now going to encourage other people across the firm to try to do similar things using no-code approaches, and it would actually help innovation across the entire business. So overall, no-code really is providing a liberating technology for the entire legal sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was fantastic. I think it's always important to have some historical context to everything we're doing, and as well, a primer for our industry that we're really trying to progress, because I think there's a lot of overlap between what's happening in legal tech and remembering that it's also part of tech, that this is this is a big conveyor belt that we're all moving down together. We just happen to be in one niche of it. So thank you very much, Richard. Very insightful. And thank you everyone for joining us for the keynote on day 2 of the Neota Network. We still have a lot of good content to come, as well as replays of old content that you can view on demand. So we look forward to seeing you at the next upcoming sessions. And thank you again, Richard, for all your thoughts and everyone else for joining us. So we'll see you all soon and in the next session. Cheers.